Alors, bonsoir tout le monde.
Good evening, everyone. Welcome to this regular council meeting, Monday, October 23rd. And I'd like to point out that the city of Dieppe recognizes that the land on which it operates is part of the unceded traditional ancestral lands of the Mi'kmaq. The peace and friendship treaties that the Mi'kmaq jointly developed and signed with the British Crown in the 18th century apply to this territory. The treaties did not deal with the surrender of land or resources, but in fact recognized Mi'kmaq title and set out the rules for what was to be a lasting relationship between the parties. Next item. Dear colleagues, let's have the serenity to accept the things we cannot change, the courage to change things we can, and the wisdom to know the difference. Again, thank you all for being here. I would like to take this time to point out and thank our deputy mayor for her excellent work when I was gone to have fun with friends in Louisiana. And some haven't returned yet. So again, welcome to everyone. Do we have confirmation of quorum? I call the meeting to order. And now do we have confirmation of quorum by the clerk? Yes, all members of the council are here. 2 are with us online. Are there any conflicts of interest that were reported? None? Item 6, adoption of agenda, moved by Councillor Turgeon-Roy, seconded by the Deputy Mayor Melissa Jeannet. On the question. No questions. Those in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed, nay. The motion carries as presented. That brings us to item 7, presentations, inquiries, and petitions. 7.1, inquiries by council members, Kodiak Regional RCMP. And as usual, we welcome Inspector Para. Welcome. I'm just looking for your button here. There we go. All right. Your worship, councillors. In terms of updates on the efforts of our crime reduction team, I'm going to just be mentioning a few operations that took place recently. On October 10th, this team did worked on an operation on Seam Street. They saw they were checking on his curfew. They saw him running away from the police, so he was arrested without incident for not respecting his curfew. And they found a large quantity of cocaine and crystal meth, as well as drug accessories. The suspect was brought to the detachment and then to provincial court to respond to the charges. And he was kept in detention he will be kept in detention until his next court appearance. And I point that out because when we have people on a curfew, we do sporadic checks to make sure that they are following the conditions that were imposed by the court. Later, on October 11th, the same unit observed a suspicious vehicle with a fictitious license plate on Renfrew Street in Moncton. So the police investigated and they determined that this was a stolen vehicle. They intercepted the vehicle, and they arrested the driver and the passenger for possession of a stolen vehicle. Both men were scheduled to, or are scheduled to appear in court later and to face the charges that were laid. And a last example, I wanted to give you an update on an investigation that I had discussed with you at the last council meeting. On October 19th, investigators of one of the teams did a search on Price Street in relation to a theft at a Champlain Street store. So this person was arrested and will be dealing with charges in court. And at the last council meeting, I had talked about this file, and I was asking for help from the public to identify the suspect. And I just wanted to say that this case is now before the court. Thank you to the public for your help. So, and I would like to take some time to say that we aim to provide proactive services focused on information to reduce property crimes in the region. So public members can contact us and they can help us reduce crime, and they can help us solve property crime. So if you have information with regard to illegal activities, or if you think that something suspicious is taking place in your neighborhood, please contact us as soon as possible. And you can also call Crime Stoppers as well to stay anonymous. And that's it for my report this evening. All right, are there any questions from councillors? Councillor Brideau. Thank you, Your Worship. Thank you, Ms. Farah, for your report. I was informed recently, and this is not new, but gas stations in the local area, apparently there are people who like to fill up their tanks and then take off without paying. And a lot of people have been mentioning this to me recently. Is there a wave of this type of theft? Well, I would say that that's not new in the province. This is not just happening locally, it's happening at the provincial level as well. We're in a lot of discussions with businesses to try to do prevention. Now, we try to encourage people to pay at the pumps, because that's how you require that's how you get away from thefts. We also encourage the use of cameras, but I think control of those pumps is managed from inside in the stores and in the gas stations, and people in those stations have the discretion to allow this person to fill up their tanks or no. So I would say if you see someone who's suspicious, tell those individuals to come and pay before they fill their tanks. We do our efforts to find suspects, and sometimes people have simply forgotten to pay, but you can see that in the video when someone forgets. They're not hiding their license plate, they're not trying to hide from the camera. Those are all kind of indications that people are disguising themselves. Well, one of the remarks I heard was that the latest cases at the Irving here in Dieppe, that the license plates had been changed. So even if there are cameras, for the RCMP to try to identify the car or where it's from, it doesn't really give a lot of information. Well, I would say that in a case like that, it's okay to report it right away. And what we say to the owners of stores is, don't put your staff in danger. If people are selling or stealing gas, be smart. Try to report the information, where the color and the mark of the vehicle. And we have police throughout the city, so sometimes it's a matter of timing as well, and that we can find those people. But you have to take precautions so that you're not a victim of theft. All right, anyone else? I don't see any other lights. So thank you again for being here. We always appreciate having you here. And I know that as usual, you have lots of things to say or lots of things to do, but you can always stay if you wish to stay for the rest of the meeting. All right, that brings us to item 7.2, presentation on the housing needs assessment. One of our employees, Charles-Éric Landré, is going to get the presentation started. Is he there? Yes. Your Worship, councillors, I'm going to do a short introduction and then I'm going to let the consultant do the presentation. So basically in recent months, with the help of consultants, we conducted an evaluation in terms of our housing needs to better understand the situation of the housing market in Dieppe and to get a clear picture of what's happening. And that will allow us to, and then we've already started doing this, but developing a strategy, and we'll be continuing that in the coming months. So we partnered with David Harrison and Turner Drake and Partners Limited. So tonight we have David Harrison and Andrew Scanlon-Dickey, who will be doing the presentation. And we believe that with that partnership, we're getting a strong analysis and statistics, and we're getting really a solid knowledge of the market of the housing, non-market housing rather. And David Harrison already worked with has already worked with the City of Dieppe for plans, the downtown plans. So this study is based on qualitative and quantitative aspects. We used some statistics. We used a survey with residents. We conducted interviews with various stakeholders in the municipality. And we created an inventory of non-market units. And then the report finishes with a few recommendations as well. But here we're going to be presenting just simply the findings of the study. We're not going to be, it's simply informative tonight. We're not going to be expecting any decisions to be made. So I would now invite David Harrison and Andrew to come forward.
Bonsoir, bienvenue, welcome. Bonsoir,
welcome.
En anglais, s'il vous plaît. Bien sûr. Okay. Yeah, thank you. So this is Andrew with Turner Drake. I'm Dave Harrison, and I did some work on the Gauvin block with Louis in 2018, so it's nice to be back here. This is the third of fourth market studies that Turner Drake and I have done in Atlantic Canada in the last year. There's been a lot going on. We've worked in Labrador, St. John's, Dieppe, and now in Miramichi. And I want to congratulate you for taking this step to do a housing needs survey and study. Some cities or municipalities are not doing it. Some are doing it just because it's a checklist on a funding application. And when a city says, we want to know what the situation is, we want to know what our role is, and we want to know how we can help, that's the key. So congratulations. So we're going to walk quickly through what is a housing needs assessment. I'm going to look at the regional and provincial context for housing. Andrew will talk about the demographics, the change, the housing supply and affordability challenges within your community, and the anticipated housing balance that we are hoping you can work towards. We did consultations with a public survey. It was very well responded to, and a number of stakeholders, both developers and non-market housing providers, and we have some recommendations. Ooh. There we go. Okay, so what is this? What kind of study is this? It's to develop an understanding of the current and anticipated housing conditions in the city of Dieppe, and what we are reporting on through the study, which is 94 pages in length. It's big. There's a lot of data in it. The current housing need and the lived experiences, local development trends, existing and projected gaps in the local housing supply. And our work, which started, I think, in April and just wrapped up last month, involved these 6 pieces of initiatives: socioeconomic data, review of market housing data. We made population projections for the city. We prepared a non-market housing inventory. We did a public survey, and we undertook stakeholder consultations. The Greater Moncton area, in the last 5 years, housing starts have not kept pace with population growth, but last year there has been a balancing of that. 2021 in the Moncton area was a record year for immigration on a per capita basis. Migration into this larger area outstrips most Canadian cities, but there's a lack of housing for newcomers. You might be surprised that you're receiving more immigrants per capita than Halifax, Calgary, Vancouver. So you're doing quite a tremendous job in attracting newcomers for the labor and everything that new cultures provide in enriching your community, but there's not enough housing for them.
And in fact, we have a group of visitors from the University of Moncton that are all students locally, and they're here this evening to learn about municipal business. And
they've come to the right place.
They come to the right place at the right time.
So,
but that's au bon moment.
Thank you. So New Brunswick has a very strong economy and also strong population growth, but there are challenges with housing affordability. You're probably well aware of that, but also labor force availability. And there was a 10-year housing strategy adopted, I think, in 2019. And in June of this year, it got refreshed with more money and more programs and new initiatives. The ones that we feel are most relevant for the city to look at, there are new affordable housing grants. They've been topped up, but there are no applications pending from anyone within Dieppe. The Housing Working Capital Fund is $2.5 million for municipal governments and nonprofit groups, and another $55 million for new subsidized units through nonprofits and through the private sector. And there are some specific targeted programs. For example, Habitat for Humanity. They're being supported provincially by 10 new units per year in the Greater Moncton area. And then importantly, a tenant rental benefit has been increased to $22 million for those in core housing need. So I'll just turn this over to Andrew. He's the statistical guy. There.
Bonsoir. So as David has mentioned, there's a lot of data that goes into this report. It is 94 pages long. Most of that is data. But just to summarize it in a couple slides, I will try to do so. If you have any questions, obviously, I'm here to answer those. We've been talking about kind of the Greater Moncton area, but what does it mean for Dieppe specifically? Well, by doing some estimates of the population with the new boundaries that you now have, the Dieppe population has grown about 11% between 2016 and 2021, which is quite quick when you put it into comparison to other major cities across Canada. And growth has mostly occurred across senior populations, but has occurred across all age groups. So it's not like many other communities where senior cohorts are the only source of growth. What you're seeing in your community is growth across all. Unfortunately, we don't have migration data specifically for the city of Dieppe, at least on an annual basis. So the chart that you see in front of you is based off of the Moncton metropolitan area, or census metropolitan area. But what you can see is related to what David was saying is that in the last year, although there's been in-migration occurring or positive immigration occurring since 2001, 2002, in the last year or 2021, 2022, there was significant rates of that. And so that has been a tremendous driver for population growth in the CMA or the Census Metropolitan Area and as well for Dieppe. But so what do we anticipate for the future of Dieppe in terms of its population? So what we did for our work was created 3 scenarios for population growth. So a high, a mid, and a low scenario. What I'm presenting to you today is the medium scenario itself. What we anticipate is that the total population and the total households, regardless of the projection scenario, is anticipated to grow between 2023 and 2033. Under the medium growth scenario, over the next 5 years, so by 2028, there may be an additional growth of about 14% in the population, and that converts to a 15% growth in your total households. Over the next 5 years after that, so 2028 to 2033, there could be another 11% growth in people or 12% growth in people. So that's a lot of people moving into the city of Dieppe. So then how do we house these people? So if we're looking at the supply of housing in the city of Dieppe, according to Statistics Canada in 2021, again, applying some adjustments for estimates based off of the, I guess, agglomeration of additional land. There was about 12,323 dwellings within your boundaries, of which about 11,900 were occupied by usual residents. A usual resident is defined as someone who lives in the community more than half of the year. So those who call the city of Dieppe home. 49% of your dwelling stock is single detached homes, and then about 26% are any form of apartment. What we've seen specifically for the city of Dieppe is that the pace of construction has been particularly strong in the last few years. While prior to that, there was a low, or at least a 2-decade low between about 2013 and 2018. Since then, really, there's been a resurgence. And because of that, we've actually seen that the amount of supply in your community has been able to, for the most part, maintain course with the demand. But even so, even with the increase in supply matching that demand, we are seeing that there is a reduction in the affordability for homes, whether it be rented or owned across the city of Dieppe. So for instance, based off of our analysis, 54% of renters could afford the median 2-bedroom apartment in 2017, versus in 2022, it dropped to 34%. Alternatively, 35% of renters, and we'll use them as a substitute for first-time homebuyers, could afford the median semi or row house or townhouse in 2018, which has dropped to 4% in 2023. So there's been an immediate drop in affordability in that time. Using data or practices provided by the University of British Columbia's Housing Resource Assessment Tool, we were able to provide an estimate of what percentage of the population or households fall within different income categories. So within the city of Dieppe, we've estimated that about 19% of households earn low or very low income, which means that on a monthly basis, they can only afford upwards of $844 for their shelter. So when that's compared to the median mortgage cost or the median rent, that's well shy of what's required. So as I said, the supply of housing, at least in recent years, has largely kept up with the increase in demand. So what that says, at least based off our numbers, so what that says is that a lot of what has happened in recent years has been largely out of the control of the city of Dieppe. However, the historical trends over the last few years may not actually keep up with the increase in demand that we are anticipating in the report under the medium growth scenario. So it could mean that over the next 5 years, there could be a potential shortage of about 565 units. So that's 565 more units that would need to be built above historical rates. And what that means is that overall, so 565 over the next decade, my apologies. And then what that means overall is that the city of Dieppe may need to build between 3,500 and 4,365 units by 2033 to meet the total demand. And this is including that shortage. So there's a lot of homes that need to be built over the next while, at least to maintain current or historical rates of affordability. And with that, I will hand it back to David.
We had very good response to the survey that was released in the summer. 554 residents was, normally you don't get that good response in summer months, but this really came through. 83% of the respondents felt Dieppe has a housing affordability problem. 52% of the renters indicated that they pay more than $1,300 per month for their housing. And 64% of the renters in the survey indicated they would like to own their own housing. According to the community and the response we received, the top housing needs in Dieppe are affordable rental housing, affordable home ownership, a better or more variety of housing, higher quality of housing, and seniors housing. And the top 3 barriers that the public identified include affordability and construction costs, a lack of a housing strategy in Dieppe, and government rules and regulations. As mentioned, we talked to both private developers and non-market housing stakeholders, and they commented on some of the risks and barriers that they see right now in the city concerning the development of either kind of housing. The majority of the non-market units in Dieppe are special care homes or rent supplement recipients. So relatedly, the non-market housing mix we're saying is a bit thin or a bit narrow when you look at the range of housing nationally that, say, CMHC identifies as vulnerable populations. Across the board, and not just in Dieppe, most are commenting they find the funding programs are complex, and there are issues in deferred maintenance with the non-market sector. And there's also another problem, just the aging of the boards of directors and the lack of volunteers and new blood coming in to sustain volunteer operation of some of these facilities. As Andrew mentioned at the beginning, many of the market supply factors are certainly outside the city's control, and developers are wary to respond drastically to changing economic circumstances. The main issues in housing today are certainly interest rates, construction costs, and the lack of labor. But developers commented on, both non-market and private developers comment on development regulations as being rigid, and those are within Dieppe's control. We came up with 14 recommendations, but they're organized under 3 themes: planning and development, affordability, and non-market housing. So in the report, you can look at those 14 specifics. But we're pleased that Dieppe has moved forward with the main recommendation, and as it was referenced earlier from the public, is that you should develop a comprehensive housing strategy so that these needs and issues can be dealt with within the context and the scope of what you're able to deal with. So thank you very much for your time. Appreciate it. We can
Merci.
accept some questions. I
Oui,
think.
merci beaucoup. Question de la part des membres du conseil.
Questions from councillors?
Question de la part des membres du conseil.
Are there any questions from councillors?
Madame la maire adjointe, Mélissa.
The Deputy Mayor, Melissa. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
I'm just scrolling back up. Just to look at, but first, thank you for the presentation. It was really something we were looking forward to in the city. I think most of the council were really finding this really important to talk about. And my question is more about the affordable housing. Like if we look at the number, you showed that the annual revenue of people, so most of them, like 37% are under $70,000. That's the number for Dieppe?
Yes, so let's see. So you're looking at the median income of 70,000. So
So there's 18% in the medium and then 16 in the, yeah. So if we look at like the total would be like 37%, that's like really low. And most of our units are above 13. Yeah, so it's really it's a lot of money that people can't afford. So how much affordable housing is missing now? And like if we look at the numbers, how much is missing from the market now, and how much will be missing in like 5 years? And
sure, yeah, and that's a great question, and thank you. That reminds me that I probably skimmed over a portion of the slide that answers that question, so thank you for that. So yes, the stats say that earning under $70,000 is 37% of households. So using the same data as I mentioned from University of British Columbia, so they do work using core housing need statistics. So core housing need, for those who are not familiar, is the rate of households who are either living in unaffordable conditions, overcrowded conditions, or are living in a home that requires major repair. So they use those rates and apply them to the different income categories to determine what number of households by income category fall within core housing need. And by totaling that, you can roughly estimate how many affordable housing units are required. And so using that practice for the city of Dieppe, currently about 1,350 households would benefit from some form of affordable housing. How that's broken out in terms of what level of affordability, that can vary based on different household circumstances. How that may project into the future, that's very difficult to answer. One way to do so is to apply like the similar rate, but to a future number. So let's say we're looking at, I can't remember off the top of my head, but the 11% growth potentially in households over the next few years. I wouldn't, using a rough estimate, perhaps 11% or 10% more of that. So another 130 some households or affordable housing units. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
Merci. Madame Turgeon-Roy.
Councillor Turgeon-Roy.
In the section of, I'm scrolling back, stakeholders, you mentioned that development regulations are within the city's control, and have been noted that of being rigid. Do you have any example?
I'm sorry, being what?
Rigid?
Rigid.
Yeah,
Yes.
the regulations within the city, the development regulations. Do you have any example?
It's sort of a standard thing that we would hear from developers, no matter who they are, where they are, and it's typically around zoning regulations. But There is a concern about the ability to increase density without a lot of hoops, be that rezonings or plan amendments. Anything else in that you recall? Yeah, it'll tend to be, when they talk about rigidity, it's usually around planning regulations.
Okay,
Okay.
thank you.
Merci. Madame Godbout.
Merci, Monsieur le Maire. Mine's a very
Councillor Goodboo.
when you got from the public in the survey and their housing satisfaction.
Yes.
I was interested in reading, what was in there. And one of the things that was reported was about how, 72% reported that they had enough living space. And I wondered whether or not that covered how living spaces in square footage of the property they were on, or if it also would take into account like a backyard or a size of a property or anything else like
No,
that.
it's,
It was square
it's
living
typically the house itself.
square footage.
Yeah.
Okay. And because part of the challenge too is just when you create more affordable housing and maybe more density, then sometimes you can
Yes,
impact your housing satisfaction with parties. Has that been what you've seen in surveys
that's
in the
correct.
past?
Yes, yeah.
Okay.
The housing satisfaction is, or actually the importance of assessing whether people are underhoused, too many people living in a house or overhoused is important. Now, in your situation where you have generally a younger population, I don't think, if I recall, the statistic is in the main report. I don't think you have the same experience that other communities are experiencing with overhousing. So that tends to be empty nesters, widowers, and seniors. And what happens in that case where you have an aging population living in 3-4 older couples living in 3-4 bedroom houses, and they're desperate to hang on to their homes because there are no other options. And if they're on fixed incomes, then then there'll be deferred maintenance. And in reality, they are restricting the supply of housing, because if they could move into a 2-bedroom apartment, which would be accessible and meet their needs, then that would be a positive step for the housing supply in the market as a whole. So it's an important question, the level of overhousing or underhousing in the community.
Thank you.
Merci, Monsieur.
Thank you. Councillor Thibodeau. Thank you, Your Worship.
Andrew.
My question is for Andrew. In his presentation, he said that in 2017, 54% of people could pay for a 2-bedroom apartment, and by 2022, that statistic fell to 34%. So I was wondering if he had any suggestions for us. Which role can we play to reverse this trend and to bring the rate of people who can afford a 2-bedroom apartment to the 2017 rate?
As a municipality, to bring the percentage back to its original form, unfortunately, most of the power falls within the ability to build more housing. So the more housing you have provides more options, and generally, based off of most relationships in kind of journals and as well as other studies, has the greatest impact on reducing housing price. We're in a market now, and this isn't only for the city of Dieppe, but just across Canada, where unfortunately, to some degree, I don't know if we can expect the same affordability that we've had in the past. So what that means is relying on the market for housing has become less and less of something we can rely on. But more emphasis on providing non-market housing, which is specifically about those affordable units. That's how we truly help those who are in dire financial circumstances. In many ways, that falls outside of the realm of the municipality, but there is an opportunity to create relationships with non-market housing providers, nonprofits. I guess related to that, do you have any other additions to the non-market component? And yeah, and so creating those partnerships and helping to not necessarily speed up, but facilitate the creation of different forms of housing that aren't only provided by the private market. Did that answer your question? I believe so.
Oui.
Okay, parfait.
Je crois que vous avez mentionné aussi qu'il
I
y a
think you also mentioned that there's a shortfall of 500, there will be a shortfall of 565 units in 10 years. I would like to know if there are any specific measures that we can implement to help with this situation. I know you mentioned it, but I would like you to go into more specifics if possible.
So I think there's some initiatives that are already, well, one, the housing strategy does help moving forward because that gives kind of a roadmap for how to provide different forms of housing. So that's important. There's other initiatives that have come out. So we have the Housing Accelerator Fund application process, which could incentivize more units. My apologies. I believe there's a process for, I feel like we were talking about this earlier, Alex, the new zoning regulations or secondary. My apologies, I'm putting you on the spot here.
That's fine. La stratégie de croissance urbaine. Donc, ça
An
sera
urban growth strategy would be another thing that we could look into in greater detail in the next year.
Merci, c'est tout.
Thank you. That's all for me. Perfect. Thank you.
Godbout?
Thank you. Councillor Godbout.
Merci. A question that's come up around this table before and that we're just starting to talk about too, and I think is tied somewhat to the study that you had, is the existence of the vacation rental by owners, the Airbnbs, the et cetera impact within the city. What if any, consideration was given in that in your study or your comments, or what have you seen in other cities that you could share with us?
Yeah, so in this study in particular, we didn't have much of the data available to go into very much detail about it. So I will say it wasn't a large consideration. I might defer to David if there's any comments during the public survey component. I will say in doing other studies for short-term rentals, there's definitely, it depends on the market for sure. So if you're looking at the city of Halifax, for instance, particularly they've had a large concern in the growth or proliferation of short-term rentals. But then you have other communities where, yes, so we do work out in BC as well, where there is that concern. But in some markets, it's a real driver for the economy, right? That said, I would say across the board, at least at a community level, short-term rentals are taking away long-term stock. To the degree or magnitude that it is for the city of Dieppe, unfortunately, I wouldn't have that number for you. Actually, that said, did you hear anything through the public survey? No.
Merci.
Merci.
Thank you. I don't see any other questions. So we thank you for your presentation. I know that this is something of great interest for the councillors.
This project, but we appreciate what you've done so far, and I'm sure there'll be lots more work to be done. And on that note, I think Alexandre wants to close that discussion.
Merci beaucoup, Monsieur le Maire. Donc, effectivement, je vais juste prendre
Thank you, Your Worship. I would like to take a moment here to thank David and his team for the work that they've done. And with Andrew from Turner Drake, I would like to reiterate the message that was shared at the start. The goal here is to table this study that includes a lot of information, a lot of data. And so it would be important to take in all of this information and to develop a housing strategy here in Dieppe. We'll want to consult with experts and consult our experts here internally in order to set tangible and realistic objectives for the municipality. So this is the start of the work that we're going to do, and we're here to tackle this very real challenge. So I just wanted to send that message out to council. Thank you.
Thank you again. And, we appreciate your contribution. Ça nous amène maintenant au prochain item, présentation.
That brings us to the next item, the capital budget for the year 2024. Mr. Melançon, you have some words? Well, Mr. Thériault will give a preamble. Good evening, Your Worship and councillors, colleagues. Today, it's the start of budget season. We started quickly last week. We saw the external commissions that gave presentations, so RCMP, Transaqua, Kodiak Transpo, and Expansion Dieppe. Today, we will see the municipal fleet replacement program. Mr. Bourque was supposed to give a presentation, but unfortunately, he is absent today. He was on Zoom, but we will have a presentation from Miss Marie-Ève Godbout-Carole, who will give the presentation. There's also the building renovation program that will be presented by Mr. Corbeau, and then there's the capital budgets for general and water sewer for 2024-2026 will be presented by Ms. Godbout and Mr. Cormier. Next week, I will come in to present the operating budgets for water, sewer, and general. 2 weeks after that, we should be ready to authorize these presentations and to set final budgets for 2024. If there's anything in the meantime, we'll go to November 27th, but I'm confident that we'll be able to finish by the 14th, and then we'll have the final meeting for the year and we will do reserve transfers. So without further ado, I will leave the floor for Madame Godbout. Welcome. Good evening, Your Worship and councillors. This evening, we'll be presenting the municipal fleets. This is for all of the vehicles that belong to the city and various equipment that we keep at the operations center. So the inventory is of about 200 pieces of equipment without including all small machines. The value is of $19 million. In terms of fuel costs, it's between $400,000 and $500,000 per year. In terms of direct maintenance cost, we're talking $300,000 a year. Every piece of equipment has a different lifespan. Heavy equipment can be from 15 to 20 years of service life. For fire vehicles, 10 to 25 years. For regular vehicles and trucks, 8 to 15 years. And then small equipment would be 7 to 10 years. The equipment evaluation is done every year by mechanics. We assess the age, the service type, the reliability, the maintenance and repair costs, and the general condition of the equipment. And that's how we determine what needs to be replaced every year. For 2024, here's what we're proposing. 11 pieces of equipment will be replaced. 2-wheel loaders, 2 ride-on mowers, 2 trucks, 4 doors, half tons, and 2x4s. 1 utility vehicle for the fire service, 1 van, a 1 truck ton, a wheel excavator, and a snowblower for the loader. The replacement program for public works, installations, and firefighting includes a budget in reserve of $2.2 million. And what we expect in 2024 and 2025 is $2.3 million and $1.4 million. So every year we reinvest in this budget item. So in terms of the fleets, I would like to know if you have any questions or comments.
Non, ça va.
Nope, nothing so far. I'd like to give the floor now to Remy.
Monsieur le maire, membre du conseil.
Good evening, Your Worship and councillors. This evening, I will present the building renovation program. We've been operating on this program for 5 to 10 years. We've been presenting it for many years, but we're here to give you an update. The link with the strategic plan is this. We want to maintain our infrastructure. We want to keep it in good quality and good condition according to recognized standards. And we also want to add new infrastructures to meet the municipality's future needs. One indicator we use to understand the condition of our buildings is the building condition index. So here we calculate the total renovations that are required today and what would be the cost to replace parts, for example, ventilation, HVAC systems, roofing, etc. And so we take the renewal and repair cost and we divide it by the value of our buildings. What a good percentage, a good index would be is anything under 5%. So what we have in our portfolio right now is 21 buildings that are large enough to be considered in the condition index. The replacement value of these buildings is of up to $100 million. We're using 2018 figures here, and I'll explain this later. Values have been increased significantly in the last few years. Our current building condition index is 2.55% for 2023. So right now we're in a good situation. We're below that 5% threshold that I mentioned earlier. So right now we're investing in renovations in our buildings, but if we didn't, the estimated cost would be $8.3 million. And again, this is the 2018 values. So let's not forget about inflation. So the renovation cost would be higher than that over the next 10 years. But if we didn't invest anything in renovations for 10 years, our index would go up to 10.85%. I've mentioned more than once that our building values are based on 2018 figures. For this reason, we would like to do an update of our assessments that were last evaluated or assessed in 2017, 2018. So we'd like to do it again in 2024. And the goal is to do it with a program by the FCM. So the city would invest $50,000 and we would get $200,000 in funding. And this would help us with the evaluations. So we want to include as many of our 21 buildings as possible in the FCM program. So here's an overview of our budget. In 2023, our budget was $350,000 for the renovation program. And we expect to close the year with a reserve of about $590,000. So we already had some funds in the reserve. And so the difference between our expenditures this year and what we had in reserve leaves us with $590,000. So we'll use money from the reserve to do renovations, and that will leave us with $465,000. So by the end of 2024, we expect to have a reserve fund of $475,000. So the the $465,000 for 2024 will be used as follows. There's the youth center, needs a new ventilation system. It's currently about 20 years old and therefore due to be replaced. So we're talking here about HVAC, heating, ventilation, and air conditioning. We also need a new boiler in the town hall, needs to be replaced. In the aquatic center, roof repairs need to be done. And this is at the intersection of the roof and the ceiling. So there has been an accumulation of humidity that was coming into the building. And in order to do that repair, we would need $215,000, and then the condition index would be $50,000, as I mentioned. So this is the spending for 2024. Here's what we're proposing for 2025. We would have $397,000 in renovations. For the Dieppe market, we would like to redo the south side of the roof for $150,000. And then there's some flooring that needs to be updated because there's so much foot traffic, Saturday markets and other activities. And then there's Repère Jeunesse de Dieppe, the Boys and Girls Club, as some people call it, needs a roofing replacement. It would be $180,000. And I'd like to say the Boys and Girls Club celebrated their 50th anniversary last weekend. Yes, so the roof is definitely due to be replaced. So in 2026, we are looking to spend $326,000. So we would need the Arts Center roof needs some repair. So on the north side where the town hall used to be, and the firefighters. And there's also a pool dehumidifier system for the aquatic center that will need to be replaced, or actually it's a major repair. It's so big we can't get it out of the building, so we have to replace so many parts that it's tantamount to a replacement. And so that's the presentation for the renovation program. Any questions or comments? Ms. Godbout. My first question is as follows. When we update the building condition index, what are the downstream effects? So if I look at how we use the BCI, if we base it all on the building's value, we'll have higher fee. Will we have any higher fees like insurance or other costs? So what is the impact of having these evaluations? No, the insurance wouldn't be affected, but it would give us an idea of the value of our buildings. So it'll help us bring down that index, but we also expect that the cost of renovations will be more expensive because labor costs have increased, material costs have increased. So this would help us increase the budget according to the numbers that we have. Like perhaps we're okay with $350,000, but it would give us an idea of how much we need to invest in our buildings in the next 10 or so year to maintain the condition and quality of our buildings. We want to keep that index under 5%. That's a partial answer to my question. I do have a follow-up. Perhaps you can elaborate, or Mr. Thériault could. But when we look at the index, does it give us an idea of other costs that might increase? Does the index affect other parts of the budget? I'm just wondering if there are any collateral effects to increasing the index. No, for me, the index is a tool to see, to understand the renovations that need to be made. So the roofs, the HVAC systems. So it really just looks at the buildings and the parts of the buildings. It doesn't really relate to repair costs, heating, insurance. Those are not calculated with the building condition index. Mr. Thériault. So for insurance, buildings already, these evaluations are done year after year. The insurance evaluates the buildings year after year, so don't worry. Insurance is on top of building assessments. Well, yes, but sometimes if we increase our own assessments and then there are independent evaluations, I'm just wondering if there's any consequences to this. Do we save money by using this program to pay for other renovations, but then will it cost us more somewhere else because our buildings are worth more? That's just a connection that I was making, and I wanted to know if it was reasonable to think that or not. I would say no, I wouldn't see it in that way exactly. Thank you.
Monsieur Lantaigne.
Thank you, Councillor Lantaigne. Thank you, Your Worship. Thank you for the presentation, Rémi. In recent years, we invested significantly in energy efficiency, modernization, and there are incentives that are available for that. So this year, do you know that if everything that could be done was done? Because there are incentives. Yeah, 2 or 3 years ago, we'd done a lot of initiatives, but this year, most of what was prioritized was not energy consuming. You know, we're talking about changing flooring and walls, and so energy efficiencies is when is often when you want to go change lighting and heating, and that's what I'm looking at next year. Heating, we'll go and get money from New-Brunswick energy efficiency, but we don't have targets. We're in terms of maximums. Well, it's just that when there are incentives, you have to take advantage of them. Yeah, we're working with the FCM on a big project, and there are incentives in that project as well. Okay, thank you. Councillor Thibodeau. Thank you, Worship. You talked about repairing the market roof. Where's the expansion project at? You know, if we do all the changes at once, you know, that there might be financial benefits to doing that work. But when are you planning and exploring the market? On October 30th, sorry, we're going to be having discussions with you, the council, on an initiative that we want to propose for 2024. And that would become a priority, and it could have an impact on what Rémi is talking about. So the question is, you know, is always, you know, if the project doesn't go ahead, then maybe we need to repair the roof, because if there could be bad weather that could do damage. But we'll be talking about that on October 30th. Okay, well, that's where I want us to go with my comments then. And we'll also be talking about this a little bit in the budget aspect of this, or budget presentation. Councillor Jeannet, just a question for information purposes. When you talk about greenhouse gas reductions, we're talking about what are you comparing the reduction to? Well, the FCM program will help us with the facility condition index, but the FCM project is to have a plan to reduce greenhouse gas emissions by 50% in the next 10 years, and then by 80%. So when we apply, we'll do an evaluation of what our greenhouse gases are, and the plan is to have something in place for all building to reach a 50% reduction in 10 years, and then 80% in 20 years. So part of that study will look at the condition of our facilities, and so when we replace lighting, we win on two fronts as well. So, and that's something that I forgot to mention, but energy is part of that study as well. Okay, so it's not necessarily in relation to emissions from years ago. When we look at Canadian targets, they talk about 40 to 40% reductions from rates in 2005 by 2030. So these figures are different from. There'll be a difference in our rate of emission reduction there. So I wonder if the FDM thought about that, or if, well, for me, it's more about meeting the conditions of the FCM and to get the funding. But all reductions are good. If we can reduce our emissions by 50% in the next 10 years, it's already a step in the right direction. But I could check and to see, if they have a relationship to past emission levels. Not sure. All right, thank you. Okay, I don't see any more questions for this presenter. Thank you for your presentation. Hello again. All right, now I'll be talking about the budget, capital budgets. So I'll be talking about 24 to 26. And I'm going to start with the financial plan overview. When the financial plan was created in 2018, the goal was to achieve a balanced budget. In 2020, there was a target of 10% by 2027, but we've already reached that as of 2023. And in the financial plan, there was a question of maximum load, $1.5 million per year. That no longer meets the needs of the city. The city is growing, inflation is going up. So $1.5 million is no longer a comfortable level for the city. So what we're going to be doing is we're going to rework that financial plan, and we're going to be proposing staying under 10% of indebtedness. And here, what we see, I just wanted to show you what the debt to equity ratio is. So we reached a summit in 2000, or a peak in 2007, and that's when the City Hall was built and Dieppe Boulevard was built. But don't forget that this is based on the budget. So that the lower the budget, the more we lend money, or we loan money. We get loans, rather, sorry. So this shows what we're proposing and what's coming up in the coming years. All right, so when there's a budget surplus, we replenish our general operating reserve, and it's 5% of our annual budget. And with the rest of the money, we divide the half. Half goes towards the reserve equipment replacement program, replacing equipment that the city owns already. And the other half goes to financing future projects. And then now, in terms of operation capital and debt payment, we take 25% of the operating budget to pay our replacement programs and to pay down our debts. If the debt goes down, our capital increases. Let's take now for the next 3 years. Here's what we're proposing. So infrastructure, transportation, we're looking at $68.7 million. Water and sewer infrastructure, $33.7 million. Culture, leisure, and community life, $21.4 million. The fleet equipment program, $9.2 million, and land purchases, $7.1 million. So over the next couple of years, we are looking at investing $140.1 million. Now, in terms of the financing sources, we have operating capital at $30.7 million, the gasoline tax, $5.8 million. Our reserves, that was money that we have already in our coffers at 12.7 million. Contributions with provincial, federal, and other $50.5 million rather, and the money that we borrowed is $40.4 million for a total of $140.1 million. So now I'd like to hand the mic over to Mr. Cormier to talk about our engineering programs. Thank you, Marie-Ève. Good evening, Your Worship, councillors. I'm going to be talking about the engineering projects that are coming up in the next few years. I'll give a brief description of what you have. Now you see the amounts, but if you have questions that are more specific, you can stop me and I'll try to give you more detail. So for 2024, we've got microsurfacing program. And so microsurfacing is really applying a thin layer of bitumen and gravel. And that increases the lifespan of roads by 5 to 10 years. And we do that probably 4 to 5 years after asphalting takes place. So next year, what we're proposing is to do Gauvin between Collège and Brodeur streets, and between Melançon, starting from Dieppe to the former limits of the city. The Champlain-Acadie intersection improvements, we had talked a bit about that last year, but here you see the amount. This includes new traffic lights, and the amount also reflects the possibility of doing work on Saint-Laurent beside Acadie. The aqueduct replacement on Chartersville. There have been a number of breaches in that section of the road in particular, from Gorvette to Dieppe. So on that section, the asphalt has deteriorated. So while we change the aqueduct, or the water main rather, we will do that other work. And then from Gorgette to Champlain, we would be doing the municipal section of Fournier Street. So that's the street going to the trailer park. And then pedestrian crossings on Dieppe Boulevard. We've had a lot of feedback in recent years that it's not safe. So let's say between Lakeburn and Melançon, there's a tunnel not far from the park or from the golf course, but it's a challenge to get there for people in wheelchairs. So what we're proposing is to do a crossing at that location. But we have to determine whether we need traffic lights now or flashing lights. So we're looking at the situation right now. The paving of various streets. So every year we have a certain amount of money set aside. And I talked about this a bit last year as well. We do an assessment every 3 years. So we go around in a little van and it's equipped with cameras and a laser, and that measures the gutters and the surface of the street. And in 2022, we've done all the cities all city streets, and 10% of our streets were in good condition. So next year, we're going to go and assess the roads that were identified as being in poor shape. So next year, the sections that we'll be looking at are from Complète, Vézina, GF Bourgeois, Raphaël, and that's in the southern part of the city, not far from the city limits, and Amiro Street. We're going to do a section of the Clarence Cormier Street, Tranquille Street, Obama Street, and Colette Street, the entire street, and then there's a street in the industrial park that has deteriorated as well. Now, plan and specs. Now, that amount here is for what's coming in 2025. So next year, we are going to be starting engineering plans for projects that will be conducted in 2025. So I will be presenting a list of those projects. So I don't know if any questions so far. Question? Oh, I see Councillor Leboutier has her hand up. Thank you, Your Worship. I'd raised my my hand before, and it was about the indebted ration. Is the $40 million that we're looking at, will that meet the 10% threshold as well? I'm going to go back to that. Yes, with our $40 million, we had calculated that it'd be around 8 to 9%. I think. Okay. So that included the addition of that loan as well. All right. All right. I don't see any other questions or any other hands raised. Oh, sorry. Rather, Councillor Thibodeau has just raised his hand. Thank you, Your Worship. Marc-André, when you were talking about the streets that were going to be paved, I didn't hear you talk about Chartersville between Pascal and Dieppe. Now, I have residents who, for a number of years, have been complaining about that section of the street. It's really in poor shape. There's a lot of bumps, and then it makes a lot of noise when trucks are going over that section of the street. So, and they're not very happy. So I don't know if that was assessed, or I think you'd have to recheck it and think about it again. Okay, I've made a note of that. Thanks. All right, Councillor Brideau. Thank you, Your Worship. I also didn't hear anything about Sainte-Thérèse Street, and that's a street that's in pretty poor shape too. There's a lot of noise when cars go over that street, but I didn't hear anything from you about that street yet. So, oh, there's some good news. And the next, I have some good news on the next slide about that street. Oh, okay, maybe I was I spoke too soon. All right, let's continue. All right, for new projects, we have Melançon Road and Fox Creek. We went and got funding last year. We talked about, whether that it would be dependent on funding. But we'd applied for funding a few years ago, and costs have gone up. So now we have to increase the budget. So this amount reflects that amount. So realignment of Thomas Street. Now, there are a number of phases in this project. The first one was in 2014. We did improvements to the intersection with Champlain and Industrial Street. So the second phase will be a roundabout at Gauvin Street and La France Street. We're going to try to extend it southward, but for the time being, we're limited. And then we're going to be looking at Pascal and Gauvin. And some people are very happy. We see them celebrating, but we don't hear them. There's a bit of work as well for the sanitation. So for future projects, this amount is for medium and long-term projects that are in the planning stages. Aviation Avenue, that's a project that's underway, but again, there's been an increase in budget, and there's also been funding from the federal government. Gauvin Block, $1.5 million in the downtown area. Again, there's been an increase in costs. We can't escape it. And that's for the 10 units that are going to be going on to Melançon Road. active transportation link on Lorette Street. So Lorette Street, since it was there's a connection with Wakeburn, there are more vehicles, and it's now considered a collector street, and so we're proposing to make a connection, an active transportation link to Irreview just up to Lakeburn, and we're looking to whether to make it a trail or a sidewalk. All right, plan and specs. There's a little amount here, and that's to assess the possibility of downtown pedestrian crossings on Champlain Street. And if it goes ahead, it will be for the engineering component of that project. So now, for these projects here, are there any questions? Any questions? No? Oh, sorry, Councillor Brideau. Thank you, Your Worship. Just a detail. Now, we talked about this last year. Gaspé Street from Notre Dame to Collège Street, where there's no sidewalk. There's a lot of people who walk there. We talked about this a bit last year, that there might be a possibility of, like on Gould Street, of having lines to indicate a sidewalk where people, is that going to be, well, that's going to be a private project. The idea is maybe to go and to consult with the residents. If we put lines on the street, then we'll have to take parking out, and those people would be impacted by that. So, but if they agree with it, then we can go ahead. But that's something that we can talk in more detail about and see what we can do with that, intersect with that. I want to, promote the idea of having a sidewalk, because we have a children's park at the upper end of Gaspé Street, and people tell me this repeatedly, and not just for the children, but for adults as well. We have a lot of seniors who walk there, and I complained a number of times of the speed on that of vehicles on that street. I don't want somebody to be injured before we do something. That would that would be heartbreaking to have that happen. All right. Councillor Jeannet. Thank you, Your Worship. I just want to add to the Christmas gift list, and we talked about this already in the past, on Amiro Street, at Fox Street and Margaret. Can we think about maybe adding a light there or something so that people can circulate more easily? Definitely. Yeah, in the coming years, we can do counts and do assessments to determine what the needs are at that intersection. For safety, yes. All right, thank you. All right, I don't see any more questions. Thank you for your presentation. Well, I have another slide to go. I just want to, on this card, or on this it says projects for 2023, but it should be 2024. All right, that's it. All right, I'm going to give, I'll be back in a couple of minutes, but Marie-Ève, I'll give her the mic back. All right, these are other, this is the section other for the general capital budget. So the replacement program, $2.3 million. In the leisure master plan, that amount is about purchasing land for sports grounds and parks. The active transportation master plan, that includes the purchase of land mainly for trails and for future trails as well. And then there's purchase of new equipment, and that includes especially a rapid chargers, a generator, and an automatic marking machine, and a bus shelter. So $1 million for that item. And for the general capital budget project for 2024, the total is $32.8 million. So the transaction capital, 8.5, gasoline tax. And sorry, other contributions, 12.3, and borrowing, $7.4 million. And I just wanted to add that the reserves and borrowing, we're still looking at what is going to be paid out from reserves. We might be able to reduce the amount of money that we've borrowed. Right, 2024, now we're going to continue with our water and sewer projects. These are the same projects that Marc-André has just presented, but there was also a replacement program, so trucks that are associated with water and sewer, Champlain Acadie intersection, and then there are water main repairs on Amiro and plans and specifications. All right, here we see financing for transaction capital 1.2, other contributions 3.1, and borrowing $3.3 million for a total of $7.7 million for the water and sewer capital budget. All right, now we're going to go to 2025, and I'll give it back to Marc-André. Thank you. Oh, sorry, Councillor Godbout has a question. I just wanted to come back to the leisure plan. How did we come to that $2.1 million? And I'm just thinking of comparing it to previous years. In the last year, we wanted to buy land, but there hadn't been amounts that had been set aside. So how does the $2.3 million compare to previous years? And can you break it out a little bit more? Okay, go ahead. Well, there was a purchase of land for, I'm just going to come back to that slide, actually. So actually, I don't have the details, but there was a, Mr. Richard, could you maybe provide some more detail? I think, compared to last year, we had $1 million, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, Stéphane, but I think we had set aside $1 million for projects. And in the end, I think we spent about $1.7 million, but there were grants in there as well. And that was that included the pickleball course. That was this year. Now for next year, now remember we had discussions about certain sports field, and so that's what we included in the budget. We wanted to go and buy some land, and that's the priority for now, for the next few years. Well, I'm happy to see, I'm not criticizing the amount, I'm happy to see it. I think it should be a priority, because, when we do a master plan, that's the time when we can do improvements. So $2.3 million is certainly not too much money to be, in terms of being ambitious and about these projects. Right, thank you. All right, so for 2025, again, we have the microsurfacing program, and the roads that we're going to be working on are Bloc, the whole street, and Acadie Avenue. 2021, we had done from Régis to Saint-Laurent. So that's the section that will be microsurfacing. Reconstruction of Gauvin Road. So we went out, we launched a bid this year, but the prices were high. So we're going to defer it to 2025. And so when we do the roundabout on Gauvin Street, there's a possibility of buying land on Gauvin. Reconstruction of Sainte-Thérèse, that'll be in 2025. So phase 1 will be Acadie, and then Sainte-Thérèse will be working on the sewer line, and we'll be putting in a multi-purpose asphalt trail. Now, reconstruction of Leblanc Road. So that is up to where the services or utilities stop. So it's not. So we're going to prolong or to extend utilities to civic number 586. And so we'll be rebuilding that part of the road completely. And we'll be installing a multi-purpose trail beside that road as part of that project. Leveling and paving of Champlain Street. And so we're going to, so it's essentially re-asphalting that street. So last year, or next year, we don't have federal funds. We applied to have money. So starting in 2025 is when we'll do this work. So in 2025, we'll be working on aviation to Lorette. And it'll be depend on whether we get money from the province. So we'll be working with the project will involve excavation and a cast iron main line. Cop Street will be redoing the concrete curbs. We'll be installing concrete curbs and doing some paving as well. Now, when we have older streets, normally we have, cast iron water mains, and it's recommended that those be changed. So we're going to be looking at that probably next week. But water consumption in Dieppe has remained stable in recent years, even if the population has gone up. But one of the tools that we have to keep them stable is to renew the cast iron of water mains. And it's like old plumbing. It can, there could be leaks. So it's a good practice to renew these facilities. So next year, we're going to be doing a section on Grand Pré, Notre Dame, and Thibodaux Street. And there, a section that's not mentioned here is the La Tour. So that in the northern part of the city. And while we do the excavation work, we will be doing the sewer line as well. Now that's the oldest section of the city, and it's some of the water lines there date back to the 1950s. So we'll be renewing that, and then we'll be repaving those roads. And then plans and specifications; those are for projects for 2026. And that's the end of the slide. Are there any questions on this slide?
Question, Mr. Godet. Thank you, Your Worship. For Leblanc, up to Civic 586, is that where the water and sewer goes up to now? So it starts where water and sewage is now, sewer is now. So it'll go about 500 or 600 meters to the east. Because a presentation was given here, citizens wanted to know when Chemin Leblanc was going to be, because people wanted water and sewer. And so we're just wondering if there's more information on this. So here we're setting the budgets, and then we'll inform citizens. So we're talking about 2025. So next year in 2024, we'll have public meetings to explain what will happen. And then once we pass that step and the budgets are approved, we'll start the dialogue with citizens. So now it's 50% of what's left to be done. And then in the coming years, we'll be able to do the rest of the job. Great, thank you. You can continue. So new projects. So we have future projects. The downtown Gauvin block. So this is for purchasing land, and we have made a partnership with the New-Brunswick Housing Association. So we have $500,000 there. I talked about pedestrian crosswalks downtown in 2024, so that there's the assessment and the study then that's going forward. And then by 2025, we'll be spending about $100,000. So the Melançon Road Trail, there had been some comments here. So we're going from Fox Creek and Melançon next year. And then on Melançon, we'll go up to the Rotary Park. So there'll be missing a connection up to Amiro. So next year we'll have a few options to complete the final section. The amount is here. We received an estimate this year, but I think it needs some fine tuning. And then we'll have to figure out what the trajectory will be between the park and Amiro. There's some challenges because there are churches and cemeteries. And then finally, we will doing plans and estimates for 2026 projects. Any questions on this slide? Any questions? No?
Donc, les autres projets pour
So other projects for 2025. So we have a replacement program. It's $3.5 million. It's a little bit higher in 2025 because we'll be replacing buses. We'll also be purchasing 2 new buses in 2025, $1.4 million. Of course, the city is growing, so we need to have more transit. And then we need a leisure master plan. So we'll be investing in land. $1.5 million are planned for this. There's the active transportation master plan. So here we have land for trails and also the trail that connects Dieppe to Chidiac. So this is the coast trail. And then we will have plans and estimates for the Dieppe market. So this is $400,000. Now on to water and sewer. So again, these are projects that have already been planned for in engineering. So we're doing equipment replacement program, replacing a truck. Then residential water meters. Of course, this is a big project that will be spread over 5 years. So it's $7.5 million over 5 years, $1.5 million per year. Then the other projects are mostly the projects that we have just discussed, thanks to Marc-André's presentation. Now, financing, we put the operational capital 8 point. There's the gasoline tax is $1.9 million a year. Other contributions, again, this is federal and provincial subsidies, 11.1 million and 2.6 million. And then the reserve is what we have in our coffers. It's $4.6 million and $0.1 million. And then borrowing is $4.6 million and $5.2 million. So total is $40.3 million to fund our 2025 projects. Are there any questions? I think I went a little bit faster before. So any questions so far? Questions, Ms. Jeannet? Yes, I have a questions for the purchase of the 2 buses. I know that getting these buses takes a long time, so I was just wondering if it'll be too late considering the city's plans. Is the timing good to wait till 25 to purchase them? Should we purchase them sooner? We can ask the director this question. Jeremy. My microphone's not turning on. Great, perfect. Thank you, Councillor Jeannet. To answer your question, yes, this is something we've considered. Normally, there's a 12 to 18-month waiting period from the moment that we place the order. So the line that we see here of $1.4 billion is that we would make the order as soon as possible in order to receive the buses by 2025. So we've done planning for our municipal fleet, and we've taken all the timelines into consideration. So we would order it sooner and then pay for it in 2025. Yes, this is correct. Thank you, Mr. Godet. Thank you, Your Worship. I have a quick question. I'd like to talk about residential water meters. This is a project we're starting in 2025. It'll spread over 5 years. That's what's planned, yes. Okay, so Is this realistic to say that by 2030, everyone will have a water meter? Ideally, but I can't give you a firm answer. Maybe Mr. Richard can answer. Mr. Mélenchon, so here in 2024, we will do an assessment and impact assessment. We'll do a pilot project with a sampling of residences. We want a variety of residences that will get these water meters. And then we will draw some conclusions to see if the city of Dieppe is ready to move forward and have water meters throughout the city, because currently there are two points of view. Some people some people have seen that consumption has gone down, and other cities are removing water meters. So we want to see what the reality is now. We need to plan the budget to do it in 5 years, but we will come back to council with a report for consideration, and it's still possible to not move forward. We would have the option also to move forward and implement the water meters, but we will make this decision in 2024 around this very table. Okay, hands up. I'm seeing Mr. Councillor Thibaudot, and then following that, Ms. Le Boutier. Thank you, Your Worship. I'd like to talk about the bus orders. I was wondering if we had planned on electrifying the fleet. Will we continue to purchase diesel buses? Thank you for this question, Councillor Thibaudot. To answer your question, of course, we are thinking about electrifying the fleet. Of course, I'm not even thinking about just electricity, just any green energy. It could even be hydrogen. Moncton is doing a pilot project. We want to see if Dieppe, Moncton, Riverview could consider electrification or green energy. It's not just about the vehicles, it's also about infrastructure. And I would say that this is the main challenge. It's not just the vehicles. It's definitely something we're thinking about, but transitioning to electric or green energy buses is something that we have to plan for 5, 10, 15 years before we actually replace the entire fleet. But that's what I can tell you today. Thank you. Councillor Le Boutier, thank you. Ms. Le Boutier, yes, I wanted to ask about the feasibility plan, but the question was answered. Thank you. Okay, let's move on. Okay, so let's move on to 2026. Thanks again. So here we're having the microsurfacing program again in 2026. So we'll be looking at what we did the previous year. So the year prior, we resurfaced Dieppe Boulevard and Boulevard Pascal. So then we would go microsurface. Leveling and paving of Champlain Street between Moncton and the Moncton Flight College. The section after, it would be the section after the one we would do in 2025. And again, this will depend on funding from the province. I don't know when we'll have answers or when they'll proceed with their evaluation. But in this section, there's a water main that is cast iron and that will need to be replaced. So that's something we'll need to consider as well. We're going to do asphalt for various streets. So in 2026, we're talking about Manon Street, Mandeville Street, Dolbeau Street. These are all streets in the same neighborhood. And then there's Grande Vallée, Jolicoeur, Chiasson, and Rideau. And this is based on the assessment that was completed last year. So let's talk about Chemin Leblanc. This is the final phase of what was presented in 2025. This would bring us to Civic 838, and this is the former city limits. After that, as far as we know, it will be under provincial jurisdiction to maintain the street in this area. From here, now reconstruction of Sainte Thérèse, we're moving on to the section between Acadie and Notre Dame. So this will be complete reconstruction and the addition of a multifunctional trail, and then a multi-purpose trail, and then we will have plans and assessments for 2027. Any questions on this slide? No questions. You can proceed. Okay, so new projects. So future projects that we'll be planning, we'll be purchasing land. Again, we have an amount of $500,000 to purchase SHNB houses. And then we'll be thinking of the Gauvin block, the east-west portion of the market going to Evolution Street, and we're going to extend until College Street. We will be also planning some parking. There will be some new roundabouts and traffic lights. With the traffic that we see in the west part of the city, this is an amount that could be used to build a roundabout or to add traffic lights on Dieppe Boulevard. And again, we have plans and estimates for 2027. Question, Ms. Godbout. Thank you for the reminder that the streets that are recently annexed are still under provincial jurisdiction. When we think about this responsibility, is this also including sidewalks? What's included under the notion of street? And what are the plans for these roads? As far as we know, it is the provincial government's responsibility, and this includes streetlights. I don't believe there are any sidewalks in this area, but anything that has to do with streets and drainage, etc., falls under provincial jurisdiction. Thank you. Mr. Lantaigne, thank you, Your Worship. I have a question. What do you mean by future projects? It's $9.4 million in 2024, 25, and then $8.1 million for 2026. Are these projects we've heard of? Is this a reserve? What is this? What does future projects mean? Well, here we're talking about developing our territory, the main accesses. So we want to. So we're thinking about where we'll have collector lanes. So it's money that's earmarked, but not yet attached to a project. So yes, we're still looking at the master plan, and then from there we'll be able to make some recommendations. That's it? Okay, great. Okay, so there's 3 slides left for the budget, and then we'll take a 10-minute break and let the students run away. Okay, yeah, so we do have a few slides left. So the general capital budget for 2026 under other projects, we have planned to replace the fire truck. And, you know, this is expensive. We also have the master plan for leisure. So we'd be adding gymnasiums. We also have the active transportation master plan. We'd be purchasing land for the paths and then the Dieppe market expansion. I'll talk about this later, but this will be funded, subsidized by building replacements. This is a building that already exists, and then we will get funding from various levels of government. Now on to water and sewer. We will be replacing equipment. We'll be replacing a truck. Future projects. These will be future projects for water and sewer. Residential water meters, which we already talked about, are $1.5 million per year for a few years. Then we want the main sewer on Dover Road, $2.1 million, and then other projects that are related to engineering for a total of $17 million in 2026. So funding these projects is $9.4 million and 1.4, the gasoline tax, $1.9 million, other contributions, $12.1 million and $9.3 million, reserve, $5.3 million. We also talked about trying to reduce borrowing and dig into the reserve. So the total in 2026 will be $59.3 million for the capital budget. And this is the last slide. This is the last slide? Yes, this is the last slide. Okay. I see there are a few people in the room. Do you have any questions for council? Nothing like that? That being said, can we take a break now? Do we have permission? Okay, so we'll take a 10-minute break.
Alors, bonsoir.
All right, well, welcome back. We are going to continue with the next item, which is 9, adoption of minutes. The regular council meeting held on moved by Councillor Brideau, seconded by Councillor Turgeon-Roy on the question. No questions. In favor, signify by saying aye. Opposed, say nay. The motion carries as presented. Item 10.1, administration, adoption of the language policy. Who would like to read that? So, Councillor Stéphane, or Mr. Stéphane rather, since this was your file in last year. Thank you. So the language policy, yes. So just to give you a little bit of context, in the city adopted a policy in 1994. There were a few versions, and the current version was adopted in 2005. So we felt that it needed to be refreshed, and that's why we hired Catherine L'Entremont, who provided us with a document. The document was presented the first time, and you gave us feedback. And this is the third time, actually, that we're coming back to you with this document with changes following the comments. So basically what we did with the new document is that we took what we had before, we improved it, we modernized it, brought it up to current practice. So for example, we introduced the practices that are related to the Official Languages Act. We also implemented practices that we were already doing here in the city, or we enshrined those practices in this document. We adopted measures to allow staff to address their colleagues, their partners, and residents in accordance with legislation. And this document also gives staff tools to be able to implement the policy. And more specifically, following the last meeting, I made one specific change that had been suggested by Councillor Godbout, if I remember correctly. The main change, now, of course, there were typing errors that were corrected and other word changes that don't really have any major impact. But at page 216, under objectives, we added 1.3c that reads as follows. One of the objectives of the policy is to give a clear directive to councillors and staff of the importance of implementing strong measures to maintain the demographic weight of Francophones in Dieppe. And so this reflects what was requested. And now remember, the language policy is a tool that serves the language that we use. But so that's what we're coming to you with this evening. All right. Who would like to read the motion? Councillor Lanting. Thank you, Your Worship. That Council repeal Policy A9 entitled Municipal Administration Language Policy and adopt Policy A9 2023 entitled Language Policy. So moved. Moved by Councillor Lanteng, seconded by Councillor Godbout. On the question. No questions. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed, nay. The motion carries as presented. Thank you. That brings us to 10.2.1 on community development. Well, we have a visitor coming in on November 25th, so we have the Santa Claus parade. So it requires us to close off certain streets to allow Santa to come through the city. So when we read the resolution, that will give more details. But we just wanted to inform the public that of the steps to come. All right, who would like to read the resolution? Councillor Godet. Thank you, Your Worship. That Council authorize the temporary closure of the following streets for the Greater Moncton Santa Claus Parade on Saturday, November 25th, 2023. Champlain Street, from the west limit of the city to Acadie Avenue, from 4:30 p.m. to 7 p.m. Paul Street, from Champlain Street to Olivier Street, from 4 p.m. to 7:30 p.m. And Virginia Avenue, from Champlain Street to Beauséjour Street, from 4 p.m. to 7 p.m. I so move. Moved by Councillor Godet, seconded by Councillor Turgeon-Roy. On the question. No questions. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Signify by ho ho ho. Oh, we have to have a bit of fun, at least, during these meetings. So signify by saying aye. Opposed, say nay. The resolution passes as presented. 10.3, urban mobility. So as part of our municipal fleet program, we want to purchase 3 transit buses to replace existing vehicles. And as Jeremy had explained, it takes 12 to 18 months to get a bus. So we've set aside the money. And we also have a partnership with the infrastructure, with the federal infrastructure program. So we want to proceed with those 3 purchases. So who would like to read the resolution? Councillor Jeannet. Thank you, Your Worship. That Council authorized city staff to proceed with the order purchase of 3 transit buses, subject to the current available funds under the Vehicle Replacement Program and the previously obtained funding under the Investing in Canada Infrastructure Program. I so move, with pleasure. All right, moved by Councillor Jeannet, seconded by Councillor Turgeon-Roy. On the question. No questions. Those in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed, nay. The resolution carries as presented. 10.4.1 now. Purchase, Mr. Melanson. So following an RFP, we received 1 bid, and it was from Lounsbury Automotive Limited at the cost of $65,994 plus HST. It's for the purchase of a 3/4-ton truck for the public works sector. So we recommend to proceed with the purchase. Councillor Turgeon-Roy, would you read the motion for us, or the resolution rather? That Council award the tender for the purchase of a 3/4-ton truck 2x4 for the public works sector to Lounsbury Automotive Limited at the cost of $65,994 plus HST, pursuant to its proposal dated October 3rd, 2023, and authorize this expenditure be defrayed from account number 3-3-20-12-7901, General Capital Budget, Equipment Replacement Program. I so move. Moved by Councillor Turgeon-Roy, seconded by Councillor Lantaigne. On the question. Question? Councillor Brideau. Your Worship, I find it very strange that we have one dealer responding to the making a bid. We have a lot of dealers in the city, and just one submits a bid. Councillor Brideau, now this has already been explained a number of times. It's not because we don't want competition. You know, we send this onto the provincial site, and there's a lack of inventory on the market. So when one is available, we can't miss that opportunity, and that's been the challenge for the past 2 years now. So if you try to buy, you know, a new car right now, you might have to wait 6 to 12 months, and it's a challenge at the market level. Okay, all right, I understand. Thank you. All right, any further questions? All right, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed, nay. The resolution carries as presented. That brings us to 10.4.2 for an award for improvement work at the Musical site. All right, so as part of this project, we have a partnership with the province. So these were things that were identified during an event in 2023 last month. So we want to do work. There's work to the right side of the site. And this will allow us to deal with the issues that exist at that location. And it's recommended that we go with Eve Excavating for at the cost of $68,000 plus HST for this work. And the staff, this is a staff recommendation. All right, to read the resolution, Councillor Brideau, go ahead. Thank you, Your Worship. That Council award the contract for the Musical site improvement work, level 1, to 641525 NB Inc. Eve Excavating at the cost of $68,000 plus HST, and authorize this expenditure be defrayed from account number 3-3-70-12-7619 from the General Capital Budget Musical site. I so move. Moved by Councillor Brideau, seconded by Councillor Turgeon-Roy. On the question, Councillor Leboutier. Thank you, Your Worship. It's more an information question. Now, listen, sound experts had identified that the stage area should be asphalted or should be paved. And now, does this work include that section? Yes, it does. All right, perfect. Thank you. Any other questions? Councillor Gaudette. Thank you, Your Worship. I have a question. I thought 3 companies had been approached. Eve Excavating got the contract, but you know, in terms of prices, was there a lower bidder, or I don't know, Mr. Bourque, do you have that information? I know that you're still online here, so could you answer? Or Mr. Richard? Oh, there he is. Okay. Mr. Bourque. Well, it's a question of companies that were available to do the work. So we approached various companies, and 2 who we gave bids to, or we awarded contracts to, they couldn't do the work. So Eve Excavating is doing work for us, and they were ready to give us a price, and the price fell within our estimate, so we felt that it was good to proceed with that. All right, thank you. Thank you.
Alors, s'il n'y a pas d'autres questions, ceux qui sont en
If there are
faveur de la
no more questions, those in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed signify by saying nay.
Bien, merci. Alors, la résolution est adoptée telle que
The motion is carried as presented. So now we're going to move on to bylaws, municipal bylaws, 11.1. Mr. Melanson, here we're talking about Emmanuel Street that wanted to prevent parking on both sides of Airport Road on a 70-meter distance. So we want to do a first reading by title, a summary reading, and then a reading by title. Who would like to do the reading? I don't see many hands up. You win. Mr. Lantaigne. Let me get my glasses out. So bylaw C1 to 2023, traffic and parking. By virtue of the powers conferred upon it by the Local Governance Acts, SNB 2017, Chapter 18, and the Motor Vehicle Act, RSNB 1973, the Municipal Council of Dieppe duly assembled adopts the following. The sections of the and schedules of bylaw C1 2023-1 remain unchanged from those set out in bylaw C1 2023 adopted on June 12, 2023, with the exception of the following additions on Schedule A: prohibited parking. 30, Emmanuel Street, be at all times both sides of Airport Street in a westerly direction for a distance of 70 meters. 44, Jeannette Street, A, west side from Gauvin Road to Napoleon Street between 7 a.m. and 4 p.m. Monday to Friday. Moved by Councillor Lantaigne, seconded by, on the question, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed by saying nay. Motion carried. And this brings us to third reading by title only. Mr. Lantaigne. Bylaw C-1, 2023-1, a bylaw relating to traffic and parking in the city of Dieppe. Moved by Councillor Lantaigne, seconded by Councillor Brideau. On the question, no questions. The bylaw is amended as presented. So now for bylaw, no, sorry. We just did this one. So now point 11.2, bylaw Z-9, 2710. A bylaw to amend the municipal development plan bylaw, territory annexation project. We will proceed with the reading of the summary by Councillor Jeannet. This will be a little long. Thank you, thank you, Your Worship. So this is the summary reading of bylaw Z-9, 2017-10, a bylaw to amend the bylaw relating to the City of Dieppe Municipal Development Plan by virtue of the powers conferred upon it by the Community Planning Act, SNB 2017, C-19. Dieppe City Council enacts as follows. On January 1st, 2023, the City of Dieppe increased its territory by some 25 square kilometers with the annexation of part of the Moncton Local Service District of 20.69 square kilometers and part of the Skuduk Local Service District at 4.48 square kilometers. Both annexed areas are predominantly in a natural state, with the exception of a few low-density residential developments and businesses along the main roads. The proposed amendments to the municipal development plan presented in bylaw Z-9 2017-10 are intended to integrate these new areas and harmonize ministerial urban planning regulations with the City of Dieppe's municipal development plan in order to create a common vision. The municipal development plan is a bylaw that guides the growth and development of the City of Dieppe. It establishes principles to guide decision-making and to support the orderly social, economic, physical, and environmental development of the City of Dieppe. The objectives pursued by the provisions of bylaw Z-9 2017-10 are to protect the existing rural way of life, limit urban sprawl, preserve the natural state as much as possible, enhance the natural environments, and limit commercial and industrial development in the annexed area. The amendments to the municipal development plan include the addition of a section entitled, quote, Annexed Area 2023 Local Government Reform, end quote, which provides a context for the area. Principles and proposals to guide the density and the form of development, to guide subdivision for the area, and to guide residential, commercial, and industrial uses have been incorporated into this new section of the municipal development plan. The land use map has been modified to assign a land use area to the annexed territory. I so move. Moved by the Deputy Mayor, Ms. Jeannet, moved by Councillor Brideau on the question. Question, Councillor Godbout. I wanted to know if there had been other comments from people since our last meetings, from people that might be affected by this bylaw. No, nothing. Thank you. Any other questions? If no, then all those in favor signify by saying aye. All those opposed say nay. The summary reading is received. We were going to move on to the third reading by title only. Thank you, Your Worship. Bylaw Z-9 27-10, a bylaw to amend the bylaw relating to the City of Dieppe Municipal Development Plan. I move a third reading by title. Thank you. Moved by the Deputy Mayor, Ms. Jeannet. Seconded by Councillor Brideau. On the question. No questions. All those in favor signify by saying aye. All those opposed say nay. Carried at the third and final reading, and this brings us to bylaw Z-10 2021-9, a bylaw to amend zoning bylaw, territory annexation project. For the summary reading, Ms. Turgeon-Roy. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Bylaw Z-10 2017-9, a bylaw to amend the City of Dieppe zoning bylaw by virtue of the powers conferred upon it by the Community Planning Act, SNB 2017, Chapter 19, Dieppe City Council enacts as follows. On January 1st, 2023, the City of Dieppe increased its territory by some 25 square kilometers with the annexation of part of the Moncton Local Service District, an area of 20.69 square kilometers, and part of the Skuduk Local Service District for an area of 4.48 square kilometers. The amendments proposed by the presented and presented in bylaw Z-10 2021-9 are intended to integrate and harmonize departmental planning bylaws with the City of Dieppe's zoning bylaw. The latter helps to implement the principles of the municipal development plan by setting more precise rules for property development in the municipality. The objectives pursued by the provisions of bylaw Z-10 2021-9 are to control the form, density, and type of uses permitted on the annexed territory through the integration of development requirements. The amendments to the City of Dieppe zoning bylaw include the addition of 2 new zones entitled Rural Residential 2, RR2, and Rural Mixed, RM, provisions and requirements to control development density and form, to control subdivision for the area, and to control residential and commercial uses have been incorporated into the new sections of the zoning bylaw. The zoning map has been amended to assign zoning to the land in the annexed territory. I so move, Your Worship. Moved by Councillor Turgeon-Roy, seconded by Councillor Godet on the question. No questions. All those in favor of the resolution signify by saying aye. All those opposed say nay. Bylaw Z-10 is received under summary reading. We're going to move on by summary reading for the same bylaw. Third reading, my apologies. We just finished the summary reading. We're moving on to third reading. Bylaw Z-10 27-9, a bylaw to amend the City of Dieppe zoning bylaw. I so move in third reading by title only. Thank you. Moved by Councillor Turgeon-Roy, seconded by Councillor Godet on the question. No questions. All those in favor of the bylaw signify by saying aye. All those opposed say nay. Third and final reading is carried as presented. This brings us to bylaw Z-3, a bylaw relating to the subdivision of lands in the City of Dieppe. For the reading of this resolution, turn on your light. Councillor Brideau, thank you, Your Worship. A summary of bylaw Z-3 2023, a bylaw relating to the subdivision of lands in the City of Dieppe. By virtue of the powers conferred upon it by the Community Planning Act, SNB 2017, Chapter 18, the Municipal Council of Dieppe duly assembled adopts the following. The articles of bylaw Z-3 2023 remain unchanged from those set out in bylaw Z-3 adopted on April 28, 2008, except for the addition of the following article. 9. Application of bylaw. 1. The present bylaw applies to the entire territory of the City of Dieppe in accordance with its current bylaw concerning neighborhoods. I so move, Your Worship. Moved by Councillor Brideau, seconded by Councillor Jeannet on the question. No questions. All those in favor of the bylaw signify by saying aye. All those opposed say nay. Bylaw Z-3 is carried. In third reading, and we are going to move on summary reading. So we're moving on to the third reading. My apologies. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Bylaw Z-3 2023, a bylaw relating to the subdivision of lands in the City of Dieppe. I so move, Your Worship. Moved by Councillor Brideau, seconded by Councillor Jeannet on the question. No questions. All those in favor signify by saying aye. All those opposed say nay. And on the last page, we're done. We just did this one. So notice of motion. No notices of motion. Inquiries and announcements by members of council. Councillor Godet. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I have nothing this evening. Thank you. Councillor Le Boutillier. Thank you, Your Worship. I have 2 points. I have two questions, points of information. In the spring, I'd like to know where we're at on the zoning and the buffer area. Councillor Girard.
On a entrepris des discussions à l'interne avec...
We've started internal discussions with the Urban Development Department. So if there are things that are adopted by the council with regard to an urban development strategy, we'll be asking for a mandate to look at the question, and then we'll come back with some proposals. We want to see provincially and nationally what's being done, what the best practices are. We have things to look at. So we're continuing our discussions so that we really scope out the question, and then we'll come back to you with a mandate for a request for a mandate for 2024 that's more specific. All right, thank you. Another point that I would like to bring is the traffic challenges that we often get. Recently, we've had complaints since the Dolbeau connection. The area from Dolbeau, in Fortune and Pascal, people park on both sides of the road, and it would be good to look at that challenge and to see if we could eliminate parking at least on one side of the street in that area. All right, I've made a note of that. Thank you. Thank you. That's all for me. Yep. Councillor Jeannet. Thank you, Your Worship. I just wanted to add to what Lise mentioned about Dolbeau Street. It's not just the parking that could be a problem, but that street is getting very busy. And there's, I have worries about the speed there. And I think there have been a few accidents that occurred in that region as well. So maybe we could look at the speed to see if there's something that we can do. But otherwise, thank you again to my colleagues for the past meetings that went very well. Thank you for the mayor for having made a trip and for allowing me to take his seat. It really put me out of my zone of comfort, but and in the meetings and the events that I attended, it taught me to kind of take my place a little bit more. So it was a pleasure, but I'm still very happy that you're back. So that there were a number of events that I really enjoyed attending, but there's a few that really impressed me. When I went to Elgin to meet with the Fort Folly First Nation that we met with recently to install the flag, I was really pleased. We deposited salmon into the Paulet River with a view to having the Atlantic salmon return to the Petit Kodiak River. So it was a very touching experience, and it's something that I will always remember. There was also the FMNB. They had a number of workshops, and there was a word from the Official Languages Commissioner. We talked about finances. The Navratri was an evening organized by the Indian community. There was lots of colors and dancers, and it's a big circle of dancers. And there were 100 or more people dancing at the same time. There was Indian foods from different regions of India. And it was very interesting to see all these people. There are lots of entrepreneurs, and to hear about their challenges since they've arrived, how they're creating a space for themselves here. And then this weekend, there was the Italian evening as well. It was really interesting. There was Senator Francesca Lamarca, who was there. She is a senator from Italy for the North America and Central America. So it was a wonderful evening. All right, thank you. Councillor Brideau. Thank you, Your Worship. I just have two things that I want to bring up. During the weekend, the AFMNB held a conference, and I paid a visit to our fire station. It was the opening of the Fire Safety Week, and I have to congratulate Chief Marc Cormier for the way that they welcomed people. So first of all, I was very surprised by the number of people in attendance. There were kids, and it was very well organized. So hats off to them. André Casey, I spoke with him, and we discussed a lot of things about improvements that have made in recent years. And I also had an opportunity to talk with our firefighters. So it's important for me to say thank you to our firefighters for the work that they do for the city. These are young men and women. And anyways, I just want to say hats off to them. It was great. It was well organized, and it was a great day. My second point is, listen, next week we have our children visiting, so we have to be extra safe. And so I want to wish them a happy Halloween to all our little monsters who will be out on the streets. Councillor Thibodeau now. Sorry, I skipped Councillor Thibodeau. Thank you, Your Worship. I just have one thing to say this evening. I want to offer my congratulations to Cindy Roy, who received the Antonin Maillet Award for all of her work. So congratulations, and you're a star here in Acadia. Councillor Turgeon-Roy. I just have a question for information purposes. Marché Street. Now, there are lamp posts on one side that are not working in the evening. Is that because there's a breakdown, or are we trying to save money? I got feedback from people who live downtown, and in the evening, especially when the workshop l'atelier is closed, it's really dark in that area. And I passed by and I saw that there are lamp posts, but they weren't lit. So, all right, we'll do a follow-up. Thank you. That's all for me. Have a good week. Councillor Godbout. All right, just a comment. I just want to thank Mr. Simard for developing the language policy, and I want to give a shout out to all the staff. I think it's an excellent policy. The objectives are policy, or the policies are, or the objectives are excellent, and I'm really happy to see that addition to the objective section with regard to the demographic weight of Francophones. And so have a good week and happy Halloween. Councillor Lanting. Nothing for me, Your Worship. All right. Well, same thing for, I don't have much to say tonight. I am just getting back from a trip, and I'm happy to see you all again. Thank you to all our presenters tonight. We had excellent presentations. We have a clear sense of where the municipality is going, and things are moving. So have a nice evening, everyone.